We want the internet to be absolutely free from domination of any monopoly, duopoly. We want the internet to be a safe and trusted space. We don't want this toxic, chaotic, anything goes, nobody is held accountable type of a domain. The data protection, personal data protection bill is going to create a significant behavioral change amongst all those entities who collect user data. How can anybody want an internet to be toxic and chaotic, and who benefits from that? Certainly not the platforms who are going to get all kinds of hate mail. The Indian internet is very different from the internet of around the world. Because of Prime Minister Narendra Modi ji delivering so much of governance on the internet, the world is looking at India post-COVID very differently. What we have achieved in COVID to the power of our technology enablement that the Prime Minister, his foresight from 14 to 19, the stuff that the government of India did. And that has really helped us distinguish ourselves so differently from every other country in the COVID time. Prime Minister has been absolutely gracious. Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, we will share our technologies, our learnings, our know-hows and our expertise with the world's countries. On the issue of Agnipath, and I say this with seriousness, it is a very powerful and a very good thing for the future of our armed forces and the future of Indian youth. I have played badminton as a youngster on a badminton court with a fighter pilot to find 2 days later that he died in a crash. For me, the fact that I couldn't serve my nation in uniform, in a sense, I think I'm compensating by serving in public life now.
Namaste, Jai Hind. Welcome to another edition of ANI Podcast with Smita Prakash. Today my guest is three-time Member of Parliament, Rajeev Chandrasekhar. Besides being a politician, Rajeev is also an entrepreneur and technocrat. He serves in the Modi Cabinet as Minister of State for Electronics and Information Technology and Minister of State for Skill Development and Entrepreneurship. Rajeev doesn't hesitate to speak his mind on administrative reforms, national security and welfare of veterans. Joining me in the podcast is my colleague Sahil Pandey. Welcome to the podcast, Mr. Chandrasekhar. We're very, very happy that you're here with us. A million questions we want to ask you. Since you are the Modi government's go-to person on everything digital, this podcast will be about, of course, Skill India. It will be about the new digital bill. But there'll also be politics. So I will ask you about the Gujarat election, about Himachal results. But first, of course, about this Twitter files. I mean, you have said that, this is weaponization of misinformation with regard to Twitter files. So I would want to know about this new digital policy and how it's going to safeguard Indians and the Indian digital space. But before I do all that, for those of our viewers and readers who don't know and listeners who don't know about what Twitter files is all about, here's a short explainer because, it is a controversy and it is something which is impacting on many people. So I thought I would do a short explainer and after that ask you about this. Twitter Files is a document written by a journalist which exposed the blacklisting and shadow banning done by Twitter before Elon Musk bought in. So, Mr. Chandrasekhar, my question follows after this explainer that how is this new digital law that you're bringing about, how is this going to safeguard Indians from the fallout of this weaponization of Twitter, as you said?
Smita, thank you for having me. This is the first podcast that I'm doing after, I think, 3.5 years. So,
really? Okay.
So thank you for having me. Look, I have said this for some years now, first as a Member of Parliament, and then after the Prime Minister Modi gave me this opportunity to serve in his Council of Ministers. I've said that we must understand how the internet has evolved. The internet evolved came to being and evolved as a force of good. And I, despite how old I look or don't look, I've been involved in the internet from the earliest days of its creation in the US. And it was seen as this utopia where all things good happened, good people came together, we exchanged ideas, there were debates. And all of that was true for several decades and years till the creation of this monster called social media over the last decade. And it has become very clear that social media, as much as it represents a force of good, also represents danger and user harm. And one of the principal areas of user harm that is coming out of social media and the internet in general is this issue of this characteristic and rapidly proliferating strategy, in some sense, of people using misinformation. And misinformation has a certain dynamic to it. And we have conducted in the ministry and in the government detailed studies which shows that fake news, misinformation, disinformation has a totally different velocity characteristic, reach characteristic compared to real facts and real news.
Which is boring.
Well,
By nature.
it may not be boring. I mean, it may be really factual that India launches the GSLV and puts 20 satellites in space, which is not boring. It is great achievement. It is really a piece of important, interesting fact. But if there is a corollary to it, which says that something happened and there is a mix of truth and fiction, and it's targeted at a person or targeted at an institution, we have studied and seen that it travels 10 to 20 times faster and reaches an audience similarly that is much vaster than the audience for a piece of actual fact. So misinformation and disinformation, for several years, governments just sort of brushed it off and said, look, it's a group of people sort of slugging it out. Ideologies are slugging it out on the internet. Why should we intervene? Why should we interfere? But over the last few years in particular, and the Twitter files proves it, that the power of these platforms can be misused and abused to weaponize misinformation, weaponize in one particular direction, either an ideological direction or in the direction of a particular person or direction of a particular community or direction of against a particular state or a government or whatever. And that, in my opinion, is an unacceptable phenomenon and unacceptable to what the internet should be. And that is why Prime Minister Narendra Modi's government has repeatedly said our boundary conditions, our principles around the future of the internet ought to be that the internet is open, it is safe and trusted, because we are the largest internet nation in the world.
Right.
We will have 1.2, 1.3 billion Indians connected. We have 800 million Indians connected to the internet today. Women, elderly, youngsters, students. So for us, keeping the internet safe, keeping the internet as a trusted place of information is absolutely a duty for the government. Because we can't have a 12-year-old or a 14-year-old using the internet for education suddenly being pummeled by misinformation or disinformation, and he being sort of gaslighted, doxed, whatever, into believing things that are not necessarily true. So it is very important for us that the internet evolve into being a safe and trusted place, and therefore this debate on how do we deal with disinformation and misinformation. And I call it weaponization because it is not innocent. It is not simply somebody getting the 1 plus 1 mathematic wrong and saying, oh, I think it is 3. It is 1 plus 1 means something, because it is to undermine somebody, it is to create harm, mental agony, or indeed something more on somebody or some institution or a particular process, like an electoral process.
Yeah, it could be insidious, as was shown with
So
with
the
elections.
Twitter files is remarkable because a lot of us guessed it. A lot of us surmised that such a platform without fetters can cause harm. But it turns out that they were not only doing it, there was a group of people that were misusing the power without any oversight, without any law holding them to account. And therefore we say the internet must grow, the internet must be accessible by every Indian citizen, but we owe it to the Indian citizen that the internet is open, safe and trusted, and that every platform is accountable to all its users. So these are, in a sense, the principles around which we are building our policies, rules, and how we view the internet and its participants.
You were talking about how Indian youth, men, women, anybody can fall prey to this, because we probably don't have the tools to combat this weaponization, this weapon of misinformation that is coming our way. So now this new Digital India Act that you're bringing about, how is this going to equip Indians with this?
So we started with the new IT rules, and we started the public consultation. The Prime Minister insists that whatever new law we bring in, must be global standard, must be benchmarkable with the best practices around the world. And most importantly, every Indian stakeholder in the cyberspace or in the internet domain must have an opportunity to read, understand, and contribute to the formation of these new laws and new policies. So, giving you an example, in February of 2022, we started consultation on the new IT rules. And that took us 3.5 months, and we notified it about a few weeks ago. And that lays out the basic framework. It says for the first time that if you are a platform and you are serving Indian users and you're operating in India, you have an obligation to make sure certain types of content do not find place on your platform. And we have laid that down in letter and verse, in chapter and verse, and in the clause what has now become famous because everybody has read it, I hope, called 31B 1 to 9. And those 9 characteristics or 9 types of content cannot find place on your platform. And you cannot simply take the old recourse saying that I'm only a platform, I have no control about what my users post or do. That is not a framework that is acceptable anymore. You are a platform, you have an obligation under the Indian law and these new rules to ensure that certain types of content, whether they are insightful content that create religious disharmony, whether they are CSAM, child sexual abuse type of content, whether they are other content which is religious hatred and national security type of issues, or indeed misinformation. So there is now for the first time a casted obligation on every platform, whether you're YouTube or Google or Facebook or Twitter or anybody, big or small, foreign or Indian, that you cannot have this content. And oh, by the way, if you somehow slip up and you are not able to, with your content moderation technologies and tools, not able to pick up one particular instance or two particular instances, if that is reported to you, you have an obligation in 72 hours to remove it. So there is no escape or there is no out from your obligation as being a responsible platform, responsible to the safety and the trust of the internet and the safety of our digital Nagrik after these rules were notified.
So, is there a grievance mechanism? One question.
Yes.
Second question, what about, is there punitive action if they break some?
So let me explain, and I want to lead this conversation into your main question, which is where is the DIA, the Digital India Act? The Digital India Act will be an evolution of this thinking into a brand new legislation, hopefully by next year, and early next year rather than later next year. The reason for Digital India Act, I will first explain to your listeners and viewers, is that the IT Act, which is the real legislation that governs the internet and the technology space, is 22 years old. It was framed and passed in 2000.
Before social media.
Yeah, before social media and before indeed the internet in its current form. And the IT Act does not even mention the word internet, just for the information of a lot of your listeners. So that act was of a particular legacy, particular time in our history of technology. We are currently a country post-COVID that is increasingly demonstrating leadership to the whole technology space. We deserve modern laws and a modern framework that to attract not just Indian innovation but foreign innovation to be practiced in India. And therefore, this framework will be defined by this new Digital India Act. But the basic moving parts of that, the basic principles are already visible with the IT rules that I just talked about and the Digital Personal Data Protection Bill that is just being put out for consultation, which is that we want the internet to be absolutely free from domination of any monopoly, duopoly, which is the openness part. We want the internet to be a safe and trusted space. We don't want this toxic, chaotic, anything goes, nobody is held accountable type of a domain, which is what it is today. People can say what they say, people can do what they do, but they fear no consequences because they believe that the cyberspace is very different from the real world where laws apply. And there is a general feeling that in the cyberspace, laws don't apply. So we want to change that. We want to reverse that perception, in particular because huge amount of Indian population is going to be using the internet. So I just want to say that the IT rules, the DPDP show a pathway to the eventual Digital India Act. And this as a framework will create a space for 1.3 billion Indians and the innovations and the economy and the services that they can all use and enjoy. So I think that is our broad thinking. And, a lot of questions are asked about why was it done, not done earlier, and why was it done. I think, and this is the other thing, Smita, that governments all around the world have treated these platforms with kid gloves for about several years and decades.
Because it started taking on life form of its own.
And the spin was that we are innovators. So governments must never regulate innovators. So a large part of what Google is or what Twitter is or what Facebook has become has grown under the watch of several governments, but with governments basically saying, no, light touch, we should not...
Globally, you're talking
about. Globally.
Yeah.
It's nothing to do with India. It is now that governments are beginning to respond all around the world, by the way. The debate of, for example, you asked me what are the punitive consequences that are envisaged under the IT rules. The DIA, we will talk about when the DIA comes out. There will certainly be criminal consequences there. Under the IT rules, for example, let me tell you one clear consequence. If the content moderation and the no-go areas of content are violated by a platform, we will withdraw what is called under Rule 7, the Section 79 protection for these platforms. And I'll explain to you, under Section 79 of the IT Act, all these platforms are protected from prosecution for any malicious content on them. Unlike, let us say, a news media platform, if you do something wrong or this thing, you are completely accountable.
Absolutely.
Platforms around the world have escaped that kind of accountability. In the US, they have something called the Section 230. In India, we have a parallel called Section 79. And platforms have always pretended that, look, we are just dumb platforms. We have no way of controlling what people say or do on our platform, and therefore we can never be prosecuted. You can prosecute them. Now, this is fine, but then they allow them to be anonymous.
Okay.
So the sum of this math is that a platform which is known, has the content, cannot be prosecuted. The person who's posting it can post it with absolute anonymity. The consequence of this is that you can do whatever you want on that platform and nobody will ever be the wiser, nobody will ever pay the consequences. So we have said that is not on. If you don't moderate these contents, you have a casted obligation of moderating these type of contents, and if you don't do it, we will withdraw the safe harbor under Section 79, that is, the government will withdraw that, and you will directly face the wrath of the person, the citizen who has been damaged or who has been hurt by the content that has been posted on you.
But the onus then again comes on the citizen, right?
No, it could be the government department. It could be a Ministry of Home Affairs. It could be Ministry of Finance. It could be state government that can prosecute on behalf of the citizens. A citizen can go file an FIR and go to a state government body and say, look, I have been, there's information on this particular platform that effectively sort of vitiates my right to life or whatever.
Okay, let's do a hypothetical situation. Somebody puts out an information on YouTube or Twitter and says that vandals have gone and attacked a temple in this area. It's been done by people who were dressed as Muslims. We don't know whether they are Muslims or Hindus or whatever. They have gone and broken a temple.
Right.
Riot breaks out. Right? Now, what is the next step?
So, what has happened for so long has been the following, which is that let us say that post was on a particular platform by a person who calls himself XYZ. The platform says, I'm not responsible for the post.
Correct.
Because under Section 79, I'm just a dumb platform. This guy has done it. The cyber police of that jurisdiction or the police department who files a case for this violence under the normal CRPC will come to the platform. Who has incited this? Who is this person?
No, let me interrupt you. Can't even go to the platform because, as you were mentioning before we began the podcast, in many cases, they're not even there.
So before May of 2021, most police grappled with who's this platform, where are they, how do we reach them? And the address will be Fresno, California, San Francisco, California, Timbuktu, post box number so and so. That got fixed because we said you have to have a grievance officer who's accountable. That is done in May 2021 as a big first step. Now you reach out to the grievance officer, the police person reaches out, or the citizen reaches out, or a citizen, somebody representing the citizen reaches out to the grievance officer. So the grievance officer says, yeah, we've looked at it, but that person is we don't know who he is because he hasn't left his name. It is Mr. XYZ. In the rules now, we have put something called first originator. That is, even if you do allow anonymity on your platform to protect somebody's privacy, that anonymity cannot be a way for them to escape illegality.
Okay.
This is a very important thing because this is a position I've taken in Parliament when a question was posed by a Congress MP of all people who said, why are we not making sure all social media platforms do a KYC on all their users?
Oh, goodness.
Okay. Now, which is one way of regulating it. So I said, at the current moment, our government's view is that anonymity does protect privacy. And we see no reason to meddle with that. However, that can only work if the platform is able to deliver to us in the event of an illegality. Let us say an anonymous person has committed an illegal act like post child sexual abuse content or pornographic content or defamatory content, not defamatory content, some content that is violating somebody's rights. Even if that person is anonymous to the rest of the world, the platform must have a way of identifying that person.
But then that can be misused, right? But governments can pressurize the platform.
Only if there is a proven illegality.
Okay.
Not if I just pick up a phone on a casual day and say, yo, Mr. Platform, tell me who this person is.
Yeah.
That they can't do.
See, I beg to differ here.
Yeah.
See, for example, in Iran, there are all these hijab protests which are happening. They're obviously breaking the law. Right, those women are going and burning hijabs and things like that. We saw this happening in Egypt and everywhere when those protests were happening. They are breaking the law in some way, but those are democratic movements. The Baloch are doing it in Pakistan. It's happening across the world wherever there are freedom
And this
movements.
is the danger.
So then what happens?
So I am not Iran. Yeah. We are not Iran. We are not Baloch.
So let's not talk about it.
We can't use a scenario or a situation in a dictatorship or a theocracy and say we will use that justification to design or justify something here.
It's India-centric.
We are an open liberal democracy.
Right.
There are rules of law. We have an obligation to those who follow the law. The people who follow the law must have as much respect as people who want to violate the law. And those who violate the law must be not people who say, as long as I violate the law in cyberspace, nobody can reach me because I have the platform can't say anything because they will take protection under Section 79 and I will hide under anonymity. And I can do whatever I can do. I can sell drugs online. I can do CSAM. I can do religious hatred. I can do all of that. No, that is not acceptable.
Okay.
So that we have put a full stop to. And that is what this, like I said...
Is there a parallel in, like, say, in Europe, any liberal democracies?
No, I think everybody is waking up to it. And that's the other thing, Smita. I don't think we need to keep looking at behind our back and saying, is anybody else doing it? And that is something we must get out of because we are, and I say this with great humility, we are the largest connected democracy in the world. And so we have to be setting the basis and the tone and the tempo of how the internet will be safe and trusted. And we should show to the rest of the world that this is how we keep our people safe. Rather than keep looking at Europe or keep looking at South America or USA or wherever you want. And look, if people have an interest in looking at the US, that is why the Twitter files are telling you what the misuse and abuse was.
Correct. So there was this whole, I am a big one for self-regulation. I understand that in self-regulation, it doesn't happen. In most cases, it doesn't happen. But I guess freedom for media has been so valuable for us. And we try to protect as much as we can. So whenever more regulation comes in, it makes us fearful.
No, and I don't think there is a fear. And honestly, I was the one who petitioned on the right to privacy in Supreme Court as an MP.
Yeah, and you've also been on the media.
Went and fought to get this Section 66A disallowed.
Yeah.
So I don't think this is a binary. that the right to free speech must not necessarily also be used to justify right to disinformation. Right to free speech is something we value. That right to free speech is the basic, fundamental, foundational principle around which our democracy is built. But to, in a sense, extend that to implying that right to disinformation is also a fundamental right is wrong.
Correct. I agree.
Right to do criminal acts online in the name of free speech is wrong. So I think we have to start being comfortable with the notion that right to free speech is something. Right to disinformation is a very, very separate thing. It creates harm. It creates, real harm for social harm, individual harm, and it is an issue that should be not conflated with right to free speech. Right to free speech is absolutely fundamental to our and there will be no dilution of that at all.
Then what would be the guidelines for an aggrieved person if somebody gets aggrieved by a post? What he or she should make sure before the matter is taken up by the concerned.
So this is exactly what I'm saying, that 31B 1 to 9 is not about aggrievement. It doesn't deal with what are you upset about. This doesn't talk about things like you are defamed. There was a particular, for example, in the rules there was a thing called defamation. That content that was defamatory should be removed. We've removed that. Defamation is something that a legal process will determine.
That's a total civilian.
Yeah, we removed it.
Not civilian,
yes,
civil.
This is 1 to 9 lays out content of the type that is, like I said, if you read that, it's very clear. There's nothing ambiguous. Religious hatred, incitement, again in the name of religion, national security, very simple, CSAM, misinformation, and it says patently false misinformation. You are a Pakistani agent. That is misinformation. Rajeev Chandrasekhar is XYZ. Patently misinformation.
So that's not defamation.
There is no defamation.
Yeah.
So there is nothing in the 3.1b 1 to 9 that says if you are aggrieved by the content. There's nothing. It talks about certain categories of content that 100% consensus is there, should not be on any platform. And if you continue to put that on the platform, then you will no longer have the safe harbor protection under Section 79, and then you deal with those who are aggrieved by that 1 to 9. That is the the architecture.
What are the steps then? Like, does a citizen who, suppose I get called a Pakistani,
Yeah.
who do I go to? Do I go to the government? Do I go to the platform?
You go to the platform.
Okay.
And if the platform does not take it down in 72 hours and then sits on its backside and says, thank you, Smita ji, for your email.
Yeah.
We have gone on vacation while you stew in your problem. Then you go to what is called a appellate committee, grievance appellate committee, where you will just forward your complaint, and the grievance appellate committee will be operationalized very soon. You will just forward it to them. It's a digital thing. You don't have to show, you don't have to hire a lawyer, nothing. As an individual, forward it. And the grievance appellate committee will rule on your complaint and say whether they have to be, Section 79 has to be withdrawn, Rule 7 has to be withdrawn.
Okay.
Finish. It'll be a very smooth process.
But you understand then the volume of complaints that are going to come in.
Look, there is no way around it.
Okay.
No, there is no, I want your viewers and listeners also understand. We are basically playing catch up with an internet that has billions of people on it. Yeah. And in India, we have 80 crore Indians already on it, and we'll have 120 crore Indians on it. There is no shortcut to making sure that the internet is safe and trusted place, accepting one platform at a time, convince them that this is this casted obligation that they have. I have met with them repeatedly. I meet with them regularly. We have reports on who's complying, who's not complying, and if somebody has a slower curve of compliance, then we point it out to them. One of the things of the GSC will be that it will create these analytic reports of which platforms are complying and most consistent with the safe and trusted goal and objective of the government of India and India as a whole, and who are not. And it is very clear, if people choose not to follow the obligations of making the internet safe and trusted for Indian citizens, then they will have to constantly fight all the cases that they have to fight in court. And it is possible that in the Digital India Act, we make this process a lot more short-circuited and collapse in the tail end of the process, that we don't have to keep telling them, go to GSE, the GSE will then rule that if you don't do this, it may be an absolute thing that you are then blocked in India. That is also one suggestion that people have given, that you cannot do business in India and you cannot act in India, you cannot serve customers or citizens of India if you do not meet your obligations. Currently, we have given them a long rope. The jurisprudence and the framework and the thinking is that we've given them a long rope and that we will give them one chance and then a second opportunity to take it down. And maybe the Digital India Act, during the public consultations, people will say, look, there is no need for that long rope.
How they have been reacting to this initiative?
Look, by and large, I think platforms and governments, at least I have said this, we don't want an adversarial relationship. Because it is in their interest as it is in the government's duty to keep the internet safe and trusted. How can anybody want an internet to be toxic and chaotic, and who benefits from that? Certainly not the platforms, who are going to get all kinds of hate mail and all of that. So therefore, unless you
Toxicity does bring in more eyeballs, doesn't it?
Oh, well, I think that was the
I'm just playing the devil's advocate here.
No, that's fine. I think that was the conventional thinking.
Okay.
That the more outrageous you are, the more eyeballs you will get. That the more you create these completely far out types of stories and content, the more people you will get on your platform. And which may be true for certain categories of content.
Okay.
For example, pornography and so on and so forth. But in bulk of the content, platforms are realizing that type of an eyeball that you get through this kind of notoriety comes with other downside baggage. Legal, criminal, all kinds of other things. So I would go out on a limb today and say that platforms have, in a sense, come full circle. They have gone straight from the path of platforms doing good and then believed in for some years, saying that, look, we can get the eyeballs any which way we can, get the eyeballs of any eyeballs that we can, and then realize that comes with
We
its
don't
own
want
cachet.
these kind of
Yeah,
eyeballs.
that comes with its own cachet of challenges for them as platforms, challenges for them to in their dealings with governments and citizens and their other customers. And now the thing is beginning to come full circle, where people say, look, we are all, in a sense, stakeholders in wanting the internet to be much more predictable, much more safe, so much more trusted, because eventually we want the elder citizen and the younger citizen, the husband and the wife, the single woman, all of them to be using the internet without worrying about it.
They are worrying, isn't it?
Yeah, it is, of course.
Because big tech really has a monopoly on information. I'm going to come to it.
Yeah.
We were discussing it, especially when we speak with senior citizens and all, they're worried because there's so much of fraud which is
100%.
happening. They have so much of information. How do we control this?
And Smita, I can assure you, I mean, I don't want to overstate this. The mails that I get, the messages that I get are not in any way thing to be just dismissed. There are, the Indian internet is very different from the internet of around the world. Because of Prime Minister Narendra Modi ji delivering so much of governance on the internet, the profile of the internet user in India is much diverse and much more inclusive than the US, where still it is a younger generation who's using it and the more educated elite that use it. So in our case, safety and trust takes on a certain much more urgent sort of a requirement. The Americans or the Western Europeans, I think the Europeans are also beginning to wake up to this. And even the Australians are beginning to wake up to this. That that internet needs to be safe and trusted, because that is the only way the internet can sustainably grow. Otherwise, it's going to become this vicious battlefield, constantly tearing and pulling, and people in the middle of it, bulk of the users of the internet who come onto the internet bereft of any ideology or any particular reason, excepting that they want to use it for a particular service that they are now getting digitally or deliver some work that they do digitally. They don't want to be caught in all this toxicity and volatility and this sort of a feeling of mistrust.
So where are the firewalls? Where are these firewalls which can keep us safe. For example, you come out with this government rule, that we can't make cash payments in hospitals. You need to make it through digi payments.
Right.
You make that above a certain amount. But now this AIMS thing which got hacked.
No.
So what happens? You put in all this
Look,
information.
one of the things is clear, that as we proliferate technology and the internet, and we do it obviously to benefit citizens, and this is around the world, and transform their lives and make it easier for them, the issues of harm are also catching up. The issues of criminality are also catching up. Now, clearly, AIMS, we know it's a ransomware attack. It is clear, it is very unlikely to be some state actor backed type of an entity. It is very, very sophisticated, and it's done from across somewhere. Now, as we have 80 crore Indians and 120 crore Indians coming online, and more small enterprises, large enterprises, government departments all getting digitized, issues of security also come to the fore.
Yeah.
Because like I said, user harm and criminality also will expand. It is precisely for that these guardrails need to be built. You talked about what are the filters or what are the boundary conditions. I call them boundary conditions and guardrails. So the Digital India Act, the Digital Personal Data Protection Bill, the IT rules currently, these are all essentially talking about safety and trust and accountability. And safety and trust includes cybersecurity. Because if you don't feel secure in the cyberspace, then how do you get safety and trust? So these are all things that have to be accompanied. Now for example, DPDP bill, and since you called me here, let me pitch that a little bit. The Digital Data Protection, Personal Data Protection Bill is going to create a significant behavioral change amongst all those entities who collect user data. Because for the first time, there is a legislation that makes it very expensive for you to be negligent or misuse personal data. Now, at a different time and a different age, if this data breach of AIMS had not been, let us say, due to a ransomware attack, and it had been purely due to negligence, AIMS would have been on the hook to pay a significant amount of money as compensation under the DPDP. So there is going to be, in the coming months, a significant behavioral change in terms of how you even manage the data, regardless of whether you're government or you're a private sector company.
You'll bring that accountability.
Exactly. So that is why I said the guardrails are safety, trust and accountability. So these bills and policies that we are bringing in today, we have today...
So Google comes under that too?
Everybody will come under that.
Okay.
Every intermediary...
Because that's the search platform that everybody goes into.
Yes, absolutely. And since you're asking, let me tell you very candidly, a search engine that has depended significantly on taking cookies with personal data of users will find that they will have to change their models on the dependence and reliance on personal data to fine-tune their searches.
See, how many of us will say, no, I don't want to manage cookies. Everybody says, okay, fine. Because it's such a nuisance.
So we will create this.
Firstly, not many people understand what it is.
So Smita, I think we will all, as governments all around the world are grappling with this, which is that the knowledge and foresight and understanding of the underlying internet that the big tech companies have.
Yeah.
There's a huge gap between that and how the governments understand
and
it.
Users also.
And the users.
Especially in India where literacy is low.
We have to address that. That is just a fact. We have to address that. We will run these campaigns. After the DPDP bill is put out there, we will run these exhaustive campaigns to tell consumers what their rights are.
So who gets involved? Is it like a public-private partnership? Is it RWAs? Is it
It'll be
schools,
everybody.
colleges?
We will do schools, we will do college, all of the above. Because it is essentially... It is like writing the constitution, digital constitution for the new digital world.
That's an ambitious task.
Really. I mean, it will not work only if the minister or the government or the minister or the ministry does a nice law. It has to be the consumers that basically understand the rights that have been given and enforce that.
Yeah, absorb and use it.
Exactly.
Okay.
Finally, the governments around the world, and in particular in India, because of the way the philosophy of Honorable Prime Minister, which is we want to create an enabling ecosystem and allow the citizens to ensure that they have their rights and the private companies or the entities that they deal with understand what their corresponding obligations are. And finally, if there is a dispute between that, there are simple methods of making sure those are adjudicated. In this particular case, it will be the Data Protection Board. So if your data is given to him as a data intermediary, as a platform, and he makes a mess of it or misuses it, all you have to do is go to digitally send an email to a data protection board, and the data protection board sends a notice to the big tech platform and will fine them X 100 crores or
Is
X
there a
1,000 crores.
human on the other side of the interface, or is it an artificial intelligence based?
No, no.
How does it?
In
Because
the,
see, in
you mean
America
the data
there
protection
isn't.
board?
Yeah, on the
no. In our case, for the conceivable near term, it'll be people.
people. Okay.
Because accountability for the decision is also as important.
The reason I'm asking you is because in America, for example, these kind of problems, when you call back and say that, okay, it can be just a hospital, you can't get through to a human.
Yes.
So
Bots.
you get stuck. You don't know where to go, especially for people, especially for Indians,
Mm-hmm.
where we have an illiteracy element also, whether it is digital illiteracy or we don't have so many educated Indians. And it could be something like, oh, my pension has got wiped out from the bank, right?
Right.
What do I do? Do I get up and go to the bank? Sometimes you can't get up and go to the bank and say that मेरा pension निकल गया, उसने मुझसे पूछा that give your security, मैंने दे दिया and हो गया. What happens then? And then like when you were asking the Aadhaar, linking it with Aadhaar.
Yes, because there's a cyber fraud which is happening nowadays. We hear about it. So will there be accountability regarding that as well? Because many of the cases are still pending and unresolved.
So let me talk about cyber fraud for a minute. I mean, since you bring it up. Now, cyber fraud, like gaming, is an issue where actually law and order is a state subject. So if a citizen is, let us say, defrauded in the normal world, what does he do? He goes to the police station and files a case.
Correct.
So even in cyber fraud, as much as the internet is regulated by the government of India and the policies are made by the government of India, illegalities and crimes in the cyberspace are still the domain of the state government. The issue there is the capabilities within each state police department to deal with this. Because this is sophisticated stuff, because it is, like I said, the victim may be in Bangalore, the criminal may be in some other country, and the intermediary, the data platform could be sitting in another state in India. So these are sophisticated crimes for which capabilities have to be built up. And I want to tell you very clearly that these are all capabilities that are being built up as we speak, even in other countries. It is not like any other country is like saying, no, we have got all the facts and we know how to do it. The US is a particularly easier time doing this because they have something called the FBI. And they have the capabilities and they have the tools and so on and so forth. So we don't have this nationwide jurisdiction on cyber law and cyber fraud as
NIA? No.
NIA has, but then they come in when
Investigation only.
investigation when there is a multi-state conspiracy and so on and so forth.
Okay.
I think there are some
Terror angle
filters
is involved in that case.
Yeah. So, but the original jurisdiction of such a cyber crime is the state government and the state police, and we are working with state governments and state, and the Home Ministry is doing that as well, which is to create more and more tools and more capabilities at the state police level. The CERT, for example, in our ministry works actively, which is the Computer Emergency Response Team, works actively with the state governments and state police departments.
So where all these most of these troubles at least are coming is that when, people, again and again, I'm saying senior citizens because they are so vulnerable, and including children, where, information is asked that give your number.
Yeah.
It comes via WhatsApp or text messages. So most people are falling victims via WhatsApp. Not many senior citizens are going into the internet to do it. It's coming via text message or WhatsApp, and they give the information.
Right.
So what happens then? Who do they go to?
No, so let's look at an example. So let's say there is a e-commerce company, okay, and you go there to buy a book or something like that, and you've given your details, and they sell you the book, and then somebody from that e-commerce leaks the data.
Yeah.
And a third person calls you and says, आपने फ्लिपकार्ट से एक किताब खरीदा है, आपको ये चाहिए क्या, हम ये बेच सकते हैं, give us your number. Now straight off the bat, the person who has violated the personal privacy of the consumer is the actual original platform that took the data to deliver a service. And all the citizen has to do at that point is to send a one-page email saying my data given on so-and-so date to this platform has now come back to me through another person to the data protection board. If he just sends out an email, the notice goes to that particular platform कि आपने data breach कैसे किया है.
Okay.
अब समझे मेरी बात ना?
Yeah.
हाँ.
Okay. Got
So
it. हाँ.
it will be. It is not like
it is still cumbersome.
It is cumbersome, but it will get to a conclusion. As opposed to today, people having no solution at all.
Okay.
Number one. Number two, and I said this before also. The entire idea of this framework is not that we have more and more citizens sending notices to the data protection board. That an obligation is put on all the platform that भैया आप अगर अपने
नहीं तो कुछ होगा.
हाँ, नहीं तो नहीं होगा, आपको 500 करोड़ का जुर्माना पर पर्सन हो सकता है.
हाँ.
So the idea is to create a framework of deterrence,
Of punitive action.
of costs, of consequences. And so that then behaviorally they will adapt to a new model where they respect the Nagrik, respect his or her data, and don't play around with it or don't misuse it or easily allow it to.
But this utopia where consumer is king, we are really far from it. No.
No. And I'm the first one to admit that we are far from it, but we will get there. Is my fond hope.
Right.
And,
that's your that's your path that you're working
and that's the mission that the Honorable Prime Minister has given us.
Okay.
That we have to get there.
Because data security, because many of the VVIPs
Thanks, Nidhi.
data is under threat, and because it's a ransomware attack. So how to strengthen this security? How to strengthen that, sir?
No. So look, like I said, I think as the internet proliferates and grows, and as more and more institutions, individuals come onto the internet, and obviously a lot of people are going onto the internet with the view that I just want to do this or I just want to do that. The issues of corresponding issues or the reciprocal issues of security and securing yourself on the internet also become important objectives. Now, AIMS, I frankly don't know the exact detail of it, except I know that they had outsourced it to a private company to manage their systems. And that private company systems, what was the weaknesses, vulnerabilities, I have no idea. Accepting that we have understood through CERT that clearly there was a very concerted, sophisticated ransomware attack on the system. Now, could that ransomware attack have been stopped, protected against? That only time will tell us, because
And
the
also
investigation.
AIMS is, you feel all the more because AIMS is where all our ministers, prime ministers, presidents, all the VIPs
leaders
go, top leaders
Yeah.
go there. So, any leakage of information from there is worrying, just even from a national security point of view.
No, so my view on this is, obviously for me, any security, any cyber security is worrisome.
Correct.
Whether it is an individual or
Yeah.
whether it is a large institution or whether it's a government institution or a private institution.
That's glad to hear this from a minister.
No,
frankly.
100%. Of course it
Yes.
is. I mean, we are like they say, oldest democracy, largest democracy, and every Indian has the right to feel secure and safe.
So,
Whether he or she is on the cyberspace or he or she is in the physical world. So, but we have to wait for the whole overall investigation to get complete to understand what were the vulnerabilities, if there were any, or was it just purely the nature of a sophisticated attack. Understand, in the context of terrorism, this phrase is used, that we have to be right all the time and they have to be right only once.
Correct.
So in cyberspace also it is really about that, because the nature of hackers is so sophisticated today. And I will say this because it just makes for interesting hearing, I would think, for your listeners, that I am on the dark internet in a couple of groups, obviously not as a minister, with another name, with a different identity. And I hear 18-year-olds and 19-year-olds talking about infiltration and hacking and cloning and SIM cloning and cloning identities with a panache and with a confidence that is just mind-boggling.
Okay.
So we must not ever underestimate the sophistication of these people who are threatening these systems and are constantly challenging systems on the internet.
Now, a very basic question. They do this for the thrill of it? They do it for money? What is it?
There's part thrill, part money. There are people whom I have overheard in groups talking about how they've hacked e-wallets and transferred millions of dollars from e-wallets. And, this was at a time when crypto was booming. And so, look, it is a very sophisticated world. And at play are forces and technologies and minds and brains and motivations that are very, very complex. So I don't think we'll ever be at a time and place where 100% of our systems are completely secure. Like I said, the whole terrorism analogy.
Yeah.
But we can certainly make it very difficult for people to test our systems, as we are doing to a large part of the critical infrastructure today. We have very sophisticated systems which defend our infrastructure. But like I said, sometimes the one that gets through, and we have to go back and see how do they get through and make sure they don't get through again.
Okay, I'm going to move away from the danger part a little bit and talk about, there are several research papers on regional language consumers of internet in India. And most Indians like to consume, it's said, that, internet in their local language.
Absolutely right.
And that's more Hindi and Tamil. And so you have this very ambitious project, Bhashini.
Yes.
Could you tell me a little bit about that?
Oh, absolutely. Thank you for asking this question, because I think one of the things that the world hasn't understood is about how diverse the users on the internet are. Because the internet originated in the US and Western Europe. Everybody just plays to this narrative that English is fine for the internet. But with 1.2 billion Indians who are going to come online, people want to consume the internet, people want to consume content which are in their language and not go via English or via Hindi. And so Bhashini is the one big project that the Honorable Prime Minister envisaged 3 years ago, which basically is aimed at creating a set of language translation tools that will allow better access in the language of your choice to users all across country. So search engines, browsers, email at one level in terms of applications, and of course consume content in a translation mode. Now this has tremendous, apart from the inclusion argument, this has tremendous other opportunities. You are also seeing the trend now on OTTs of how South Indian movies have suddenly developed this global audience.
Correct.
Because of dubbing and, all of those languages. Basically the same product being offered in multiple languages. Now imagine if that is an instantaneous process, that you don't have to do the dubbing, that you just pass a product, whether it's a video product or an audio product or a podcast or a video or film, through a platform that comes out on the other end with the same video but with a different language. And that is the direction that we are going in. And so it is an artificial intelligence being applied to language translation. The substantial progress has been made on that. The Prime Minister last year talked about it in the Digital India, the annual Digital India Day. And it is a very, very central piece of making sure that the 1.2 billion Indians can consume the internet in the way, in the language that they are more natural and more they feel more happy doing so.
So in this, my next question obviously is regarding your ministry itself. Will this give impetus to entrepreneurship, to new jobs?
Yeah. Just imagine today, for example, and that is also part of what we'll go and do in the DIA, which is apart from innovation in tech and all of that we are seeing anyway with the unicorns and the startups, and we think that is just the tip of the iceberg and will continue to proliferate and grow as we expand the opportunities. Content creation, and I mean content as in content, whether it's voice, movies, audio, short form, long form, there is a total explosion waiting to happen. You can see today the phenomenon of Insta Reels or shorts and all of that is really people are sitting there and making livelihoods out of that. despite the fact that the monetization of that content is a really imbalanced monetization. It is all done by Google AdSense or a particular big tech platform, and there is no negotiating leverage.
Yeah.
I actually think that there is a huge ecosystem of content creators and content economy that is going to be part of the digital economy that is just waiting to take off. And that has many adjacent applications like gaming, and of course movies and all of that. And I think language and translation and creating diversity on the Indian internet, and therefore the appetite and demand for diverse content will feed this underlying ecosystem of content creators.
There's very interesting initiative of Digi Yatra as well.
Yeah.
Although it links the Aadhaar and then the boarding pass just to get through the queue. So what is this initiative? Plus also because it will be very important as we see so much of crowd, the airport.
At the airports, it's such a mess.
Right now it's like a go-to topic. So can you just talk us about that and about the security also aspect
Because of
related
linking of Aadhaar.
No, look, Aadhaar is a fundamental part of the India stack. And the Aadhaar is an identity authentication piece. When people use the phrase link, the word is actually a bad word because it's not a correct word, it's an incorrect word. Nobody is linking anything to Aadhaar. It is basically authenticating that identity which is in the Aadhaar database is really Mr. X. It is an authentication process. So the Aadhaar database is a database of identities. Any other application that sits on it, whether it is a fintech application, UPI, or it is Digi Yatra, or health, or education,
Just
or skill,
verification.
is basically saying this person with this photograph and this biometric claims to be Smita Prakash. Is it?
It's like Social Security in America.
Yeah, it just says yes. That's it. There's no linkage in that sense.
So data is not getting transferred from Aadhaar to say Airport Authority of India.
No. It is just a yes/no question.
Okay. So is that answered what you
And
asked?
eventually it will be basically biometrics. It will not, currently a lot of people use Aadhaar cards. Eventually the idea is that there will be no card because cards are, reproducible and all that and authentication.
Yeah.
So it will just be if you want access control to an airport or go through security line or a PDS center or whatever, you just go there and do your fingerprint or your biometric. And that's it. It'll just say Smita Prakash or whoever. It'll say this is, you have taken so many quintals of rice from the PDS scheme. This is your balance and this is what you're entitled to.
Yeah.
So that is where we are going. So the fundamental layer, the basic layer of the India stack is this identity authentication layer, which is serviced by and powered by Aadhaar.
Right, so there's no threat as such.
For example, recently I'd gone to the US and it was the first time that even though they've had biometrics, it was the first time that I stood in front of the camera, it got my eyes and they didn't stamp my passport, they didn't even look at my visa because it's already arrived out there. They knew when was the last time that I've gone there? All that information is already there. Right? So it was just welcome to the US. It felt so good. Yes, there were lines. Believe me, because getting to the point, there are lines.
Of course
right?
there will be.
But that is it. There is no thapa and where is your boarding card? Which was the last port of entry? No questions asked because all that information has already arrived. So if we can get to that point in our
But
airports,
that is the Digi Yatra, and frankly it is not done by our ministry, it's done by the Civil Aviation Ministry, but I have studied it a little bit, is the first step to that.
Towards that, okay.
Which is that it basically, I just want to explain what the India stack is as the Prime Minister has envisaged it. There is an identity layer, identity authentication layer, and there is this finance fintech layer, the payment layer, which is UPI. And then on top of it, there will be different layers, Digi Yatra for travel, air passengers. The rail ministry will come up with something that sits on the same platform. Health, skill, education. That is the India stack. So typically, how it will work is, going forward, is that you book a ticket and you can say, the ticket will know you're flying on so-and-so date. And then they'll say, Digi Yatra, do you want to enable your ticket Digi Yatra enabled? It will authenticate your identity. And then as you go to the airport, all you do is you put on your biometrics and it will read back from the Digi Yatra app in which you have enrolled,
right.
that you are authorized to travel on so and so day. This is your ticket. This is your identity as authenticated by UIDAI.
So there is a narrative which is going on all across the world that artificial intelligence versus the jobs, it will threaten the jobs, the human jobs. How do you look at it? What is your take on it?
No, look, digitization in general and AI in particular is changing the nature of the workforce. It is altering how the workforce is set up. So the narrative is not about job loss as much as the new skills that are required for the new jobs. The digital in particular and AI in AI also is not reducing the number of opportunities. It is creating newer and newer opportunities, but they require different types of skills. So if you are skilled for, let us say, working in a manufacturing operation, digitization and Industry 4.0 means that you need a certain set of different skills to continue to be in manufacturing. If you were just a foreman of a lathe and you continue to have only those qualifications, you will find yourself challenged by the new opportunity. So I say again that digitization and AI represent not a challenge in terms of job loss, but it certainly represents a challenge in terms of reskilling and upskilling.
We were talking about skill development and entrepreneurship.
Yes.
Now, there's a lot of questions which are being asked that are our traditional classrooms equipped to produce, because there are jobs which are coming up, which you said, but is our traditional classroom equipped and bringing out students who are equipped with that kind of information for those jobs which are being created?
Look, Smita,
or going to be created.
Yeah, so I want to just share my views on it, and I'm just 16 months into this, and our the workforce is in India is a very complex workforce, because we have what is called the formal workforce, which is a very small part of the overall workforce, and then we have the largest piece is what we call the informal workforce, which covers agriculture and all of the other. A large part of the informal workforce is unskilled. And if you look at it, for example, if you look at traditionally from 2011 onwards, over about 1.6 crore 15-year-olds join the workforce unskilled every year. 1.6 crores. That is the nature, the size of our challenge.
Yeah.
So, and then on top of it, you have an opening base of about 290 million, that is 29 crore in the workforce who are unskilled. This is, I'm using census 2011 and NSSO surveys in that region. So imagine 30 crore in the informal workforce are unskilled, and every year 1.6 crore children join the workforce unskilled. Okay. This is the nature of what 75 years or 70 years of independence has created.
Educational system, yeah.
Now, the Prime Minister did two things which are trying to urgently solve the problem. One is he launched Skill India Mission, put a lot of money behind it, which is to say, this opening stock of 29 crore who are in the workforce, 15 to 35, 15 to 45, how can we give them skills? And those who are already in the workforce, how can we give them certificates at least, so that they can get better salaries because they have a certificate. Because a lot of people have skills.
Job-oriented, yes.
Job-oriented skills, but they have no formal recognition of skills. So we ran a program and continue to run a program called RPL, which is a recognition of prior learning. It is in a way a formalization of your informal skills.
Example?
Like for example, let us say you are you work in the highway construction space, and you have been a construction worker for several years, but you have no formal certification. And when you go to a job or somebody offers you a job, you have nothing to say excepting to say, मैंने वहाँ पर काम किया है, वहाँ पर काम किया, वहाँ पर काम किया, ये मेरा salary letter है.
In many cases, it could
be cash. They don't even have that. It could be cash. So this is a way of formally recognizing those and giving them a sense of pride and ownership that what I have slaved for or worked for so many years, I have a formal recognition of that skill.
Okay.
And that has really given a lot of people, we've done an impact assessment of that in the RPL. Salary progression and upward job mobility has been triggered by that certification. So that is one that we have done. But the numbers and what we are able to deliver, there still is a big gap.
I can imagine, yes.
So the Prime Minister has done one more initiative, which is the National Education Policy. Now, people don't intuitively understand how does this head up deal with skilled and unskilled. But like I said, 15-year-olds are dropping out of school and joining the workforce every year to the extent of 1.6 crores. So he has now integrated skilling into the curriculum of schools in the National Education Policy, which means from 6th standard onwards, a child who otherwise only had a single trajectory for growth, which is I do school, I do 10th, I do 12th, and if my parents can afford it, I go to college, or if my grades were good, I go to college. Now from 6th standard onwards, the child has an alternate career track. Skill, 6th standard, 7th standard, 8th standard, 9th standard, 10th standard, you develop some skills in school. Assume worst case, you drop out of school at the age of 15. You still have a skill. So you no longer are unskilled and entering into the workforce as you jump out of school as well. So that 1.6 crore number gets severely reduced, significantly reduced in terms of incremental unskilled students entering the workforce because of the National Education Policy. So this is one, we have addressed that problem by skilling in the school. The second was, how do we create a larger network to deliver more skills to more students? So two things have been done. One is the number of skill programs have suddenly gone up from 2,000 to 5,400. All the way from AI, programming, coding, carpentry, plumbing. It has gone the entire spectrum of skills. So modern age, white collar skills, modern age, blue collar skills. And instead of depending only on the Skill India network of PMKK, JSS, ITI, now we are allowing universities and colleges to also run certification programs. So a student now who's
you have enough trainers to do that?
No, so therefore, good question. That is going to be the challenge. Like if you suddenly expand the network where you will deliver skilling, who are the people who are going to be giving the skilling training? But the nature of the new age skilling programs means that a current teacher or a current professor with a slightly incremental program can also do that. So it is also giving a teacher in a school or a teacher in a university or a college the opportunity to do beyond what he or she was doing as only teaching physics. He can now teach physics and coding, or teach physics and computer repair or hardware repair. So it is also creating opportunities for teachers and teaching staff in schools and colleges to do more than what they are doing in school and colleges.
You know, there was you were talking about gaming platforms, and at that time I wanted to ask you, but then we deviated into other topics. Recently, again, it's about compliance and punitive action. Recently, this Shraddha murder case came into focus, and her father spoke about dating apps and said that, dating apps need to be moderated. And then there are some state governments who are saying that this is causing disruption in our society, because again, that's another, like the gaming thing, like the others, they don't come under any regulation, and it's causing disruption in society. What happens now? Is there some
the
law?
Digital India Act that we are going to we are talking about today, and we will do consultation, effectively will classify the internet into various types of intermediaries. आज के दिन में in the act there is only intermediary and intermediary. There is only one type of intermediary, and all intermediaries fall into that one type. The internet is evolving. There are e-commerce, there are social media, there are dating apps, there are fact-checking apps, there are digital media apps. All of these will be classified as different categories of intermediaries, and rules and regulations will be specified for each type. Again, the basic principles around which these rules are going to be built are safety and trust. So if a dating app allows, without due diligence, a criminal or a person with a known history of predating on the app, and that person does predate and cause harm to a particular person or a woman or a girl,
the app is liable.
App will be liable.
So
if you see what is happening, Smita, we are going from a world on an internet where none of these platforms had any sense of accountability, no responsibility. They hid behind Section 79 or Section 230 in the US, to one where very transparently we will create a framework of accountability. It is not to make things difficult for them. It is basically to make things safer for the users.
Okay.
There will be a behavioral change. There will be a transition. It will not be business as usual. कुछ भी चलता है, वो सब नहीं होगा. And there will be a little bit of whining, griping, complaining, moaning, groaning. All that will happen. But we believe our nazar, if you want to call that, is laser sharp focused on the well-being of our citizen, the individual. And if it's a cause, if it's a choice between that and creating some complexity in the way platforms do business in India, we would choose this latter without any hesitation. But we think we will evolve this without creating too much of burden, compliance burden, too much of difficulty for the platform. It is for them to just basically wake up to this reality that, look, we have an obligation to the users of India, we have an obligation to the digital nagriks, and the government insists that those obligations be fulfilled.
Will there be a foundation on these intermediaries to respond to the queries? Because even the police tried to approach the dating app. So will there be any foundation or a timeline?
100%. Yeah, what we have done in the IT rules is that only. In May 2021, we said you should appoint a grievance officer. So then all of them appointed grievance officers. Some did not. Then we prodded them. They appointed it. A lot of them appointed post box numbers and some ciphers and some naam ke vaste. And so their response was that grievances aayenge, but wo naam ke vaste we will give a response. Now we have said that is not what we want. If you want us to spell out in letter and chapter and verse what the grievance officer has to do, we will do that. But better still, we will create an appellate committee that will be a disincentive for you not to do your job.
Can't fudge then.
Yeah, you can't fudge and you can't sleep on the job.
Yeah.
The whole idea of creating grievance officer is that you have an obligation to hear the grievance of an Indian citizen and address it. Now, if you say, no, I've appointed a grievance officer, but I will then decide.
Just a postal thing.
I will just play the fiddle and then on Sundays play the piano and then that's the extent of my responsibility. Then I said, no, fine. We will create a grievance appellate committee. They complained during consultation. I said, look, the government is not interested in sitting here and looking, as you said, at volumes of complaints that are going to come from hundreds and millions of consumers. You are forcing us to do this. And think of the GAC as an absolute message of disincentive for you to not walk away from your responsibility to the Indian citizen.
As a platform.
As a platform.
In this G20, as India has taken over the presidency,
G20,
and there's a very big digitization push and world has acknowledged it. So how do you think India will have that image of the digitalization and how it will impart it to the world?
Yeah, we saw some of them saying that we've made payment through Google Pay and
and I'm
buy
not,
handicrafts.
Okay, I know I'm a minister in the government and it is my job to be sort of evangelizing what we've achieved. But I want to tell you this. The world is looking at India post-COVID very differently. What we have achieved in COVID to the power of our technology enablement that the Prime Minister, his foresight from 14 to 19, the stuff that the government of India did. And that has really helped us distinguish ourselves so differently from every other country in the COVID time. People really want to associate with the India stack.
That CoWIN app, that itself was...
And all that is, it stands on the India stack.
Yeah.
The Aadhaar, the UPI, and then applications of CoWIN, all of this. So I can assure you that there is nothing that we have to do. It is really an organic recognition by the world's nations about the power of technology to transform people's lives during such a situation as COVID. All the countries of the world had to deal with the same emergency. Look at how we are post-COVID and look at where China is in COVID. Look at where the Americans are post-COVID. Look at where the British and the Western Europeans are. So I think everybody today...
Their vaccination certificates are in parchi.
In parchis, exactly right.
You know, I mean, and they don't even carry it because it's a parchi.
Yeah, and I will tell you that, for example, and I don't want to divulge a name, a young lady minister of an African country met me recently, flew all the way to Bangalore to meet me, gave me quite a bit of a chuff that people think of me as that important, and said, we want to adopt the Indian stack in our country. We want to sign an MOU with the government of India. And the Prime Minister has been absolutely gracious. Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, we will share our technologies, our learnings, our know-hows and our expertise with the world's countries, so that countries that can't afford to do this, the Americans can afford to do it, the Europeans can afford to do it, but there are the global south, there are a whole bunch of countries who would love to learn from India, embed the same type of technology platforms for their governance to improve the lot of their people. And G20 is going to clearly be an occasion for the world's nations to engage with India and take this learning and implement it in their countries.
There's an electronic manufacturing also. There is a push. What do you have to say? And what do you think? How far we have reached? And
no, look.
Yeah, that's also your ministry, right?
Yes.
$300 billion by 2025-26 and $120 billion in export during that period.
So, when I've been 16 months as a minister, and I visited about 40 colleges, 40 universities. One of the highlights of being a minister is that I get to travel and meet students. And a question is always posed, how do you summarize the last 7 years? I mean, it is my job obviously to say our 7 years are better than the last 50 years. And I use examples that are just real examples. In 2014, when Narendra Modi ji became Prime Minister, we had no electronics industry in this country. 10 years of UPA, the last decade, had completely finished off electronics in this country. And we were importing 92% of all mobile phones consumed in India in 2014 were imported, bought. Okay? And it was beginning to become almost comparable import bill to petroleum. Electronics was. In 2022, 97% of the mobile phones consumed in India are made in India. In 2014, we didn't export nothing. And in 2022, we are exporting 75,000 crores of Apple phones and Samsung phones and other phones, including the Chinese brands. 4 days ago, there was a story in the Times of India, the front page, that they are exporting from India now. So, this is the distance that we have traveled. Yeah. So, and why that is important is, before COVID, electronics was dominated by China. It is the second largest traded commodity in the world. $1.5 trillion is the size of the electronics market, global electronics market. And 65-70% of them that was dominated by China.
Yeah.
Post-COVID,
the supply chain issues have come in. Yeah.
No, post-COVID, the world says we want to diversify that supply chain. We cannot, we don't want the concentration.
Yeah.
And we want to look at other countries. Janet Yellen talked about friendshoring recently, India friendshoring.
And also ethical production of these.
Exactly, trusted.
Yeah.
So the Honorable Prime Minister said in February of 2022 that India wants to be a trusted player in the global supply chains for electronics. And that is what we are doing today. So we have a target of $300 billion by 25-26. We are already at 75 billion. We were zero in 14. Just to give you a context, between 2014 and 2025-26, we will do it 10 times growth in production. So that is...
I'm going to move a little bit more towards, some of the officials that we meet with, Mr. Chandrasekhar, as journalists, when we meet them, they say that, like what you've been talking right now, these are my goals. It's like you have a spreadsheet in front of you. So the officials say that ever since these technocrats have come into the cabinet, we are functioning like an MNC. Government of India is functioning like an MNC where we have goals, targets and things like that. People like you, Mr. Jaishankar, all of you who have been brought in, it's somewhat like the Singapore model. And everybody knows that Mr. Modi did get impacted by, reading up on Lee Kuan Yew and his model of how he brought in, modernization of Singapore. So tell me, is this what happens with...
No, I think they're very wrong in characterizing it that way, because I think I can't claim to have worked with the Prime Minister for decades or years, but I certainly have been an observer of his work since 2012. And he has always talked about governance with an outcome. I mean, even when I had a few occasions to meet him as Chief Minister of Gujarat, he never talked about policy in the absence of a clearly understood outcome. So he was always looking at policy and laws as a means to an end. And the end was that there will be some developmental impact, a progress impact, prosperity impact at the other side of the policy. So I think this has been going on for a long time. This is really what distinguishes his governance style from the other hundreds of other chief ministers who have come before him, prime ministers who have come before him, that he is very laser focused on what he wants to achieve out of that particular policy or that ministry or that scheme. Digital India, he did that in 2014. I recently said to him, for the first time I was on a dais with him and I was happy to speak about Digital India, and I said, I was in the audience when you announced Digital India 2015, and I listened to that and I with great healthy skepticism, and मुझे भी अंदाजा नहीं था कि हम इतने आगे पहुंचेंगे. I said it to him. And I was saying, because I was an MP, I had already spent some 6-7 years in Parliament, and I was as cynical as any MP could get. But that is his style. That is his style, that he means governance with some really clear outcome. I have worked with many bright people in my life. It is one of the good fortunes of having worked in the Valley, and it is a pleasure to work with him because he is very clear about what he wants to achieve. There is no ambiguity. So when he says technology, he doesn't say technology must create billionaires. He says technology must change the lives of our citizens. That is his primary objective of Digital India, that it must transform the lives of our citizens. It must improve governance. It must improve democracy. And I say this everywhere, that India's story pre-2014 was a story of dysfunctional government. And the famous Rajiv Gandhi quote that 15 paise only of every 100 paise that leaves Delhi reaches the citizen was taken as a given for India. And today, to have that turned 180 degrees on its head, where 100 paise reaches 100, all the 100 paise reaches, is the power of technology. And that is what his foresight was. So I don't think it is Rajeev Chandrasekhar or Jaishankar and bureaucrats saying. I think his expectation from government as an entity, individual members in government, whether they are a minister or a bureaucrat, remains same, consistent, unrelenting, sharp, demanding, urgent, speedy, corruption-free, all of that, regardless of whether it is Mr. Jaishankar or X or Y or Z. This is my view, and I'm not embellishing it. This is how I've experienced it, and I believe
you were talking about the skepticism when you were sitting in the audience, and that is perhaps what categorizes most people, your generation, my generation, anybody that, when we did our school and college, like you went to the US, you worked on that Pentium processor, right? Tell me about that. What was, when you went abroad, what was like, I'm done with India, I'm done with that. What was that? And then why did you come back?
No, look, it's not done with India as much as I say this to students today, that you live in such exciting times because you live in India full of opportunity. If you are an engineering student or you're a BA physics or a BSc physics or a BA history, you can look at your life post your college and think of, you just have to choose which area you want to go in, which direction you want to go in. When we were in school and college, what were the opportunities? You either join, you got a good engineering degree, then you look at getting some connection and becoming a trainee in Tata's, trainee in Birla's. There were some half a dozen private sector companies that you would go and try and get. Even for that, you needed some chacha, mama to recommend you. Otherwise, you go join government. Or in my case, I would have looked at Fauji as a career.
Because you were
Fauji. But I had glasses and I wanted to be a flyer, and I could not be a flyer, and I had no interest in being an infantry soldier with glasses. So that was folklore. So going abroad wasn't so much of, I don't like India. It was really, that was the only opportunity.
Okay.
And I worked for 6 months in the original software startup called Softtech in over a Greater Kailash Chinese restaurant. I remember I worked there for 6 months, and my father said, "No, I want you to go abroad." I had no interest in going abroad, and I sold pumps for Ranbacks for a pump company called Best in Crompton. I had a motorcycle, and I used to go to Dorala sugar mills for 2 months. I used to go on a motorcycle and to Dorala and sell sugar, give quotations for sugar pumps. So I've done all that.
Okay,
but my parents wanted me to go abroad because they thought that real opportunity for coding, because I had become a big prolific computer programmer. I loved computer science. And I remember my father, after 30 years of service, had a total savings of 8 lakh rupees in his account. And he took out all that and gave me a check in dollars and said go to the US.
Okay.
And I went with that. And of course, I never used it. But it was not really like a thing that people did because it was an opportunity. They did it because there were limited opportunities in India, and that is really the big difference between the young Indian today versus our generation.
So you went worked with Vinod Dham, and those were huge opportunities.
Yeah.
Why did you come back?
No, look, when you are, I was a success. I did very well at Intel. I was recognized. I had got some options. I had made money. I had in my life, I had a small book that I used to maintain in terms of life goals, and my goal was by the age of 35 that I should make 10 lakhs of rupees, because my father's savings were 8 lakhs, and for me my life's ambition was to make 2 lakhs more than him in a slightly shorter time frame. But fortunately, way ahead of that schedule, by the age of 26, I had made much more money, and I came back to India. And Rajesh Pilot, who used to be a minister of telecom those days, was a student of my father's in the Air Force. So my father very proudly wanted to show off his son to Rajesh Pilot, brought me to Delhi. And I remember in the house of Rajesh Pilot, he sat me down in that big lawn and saluted my father, and I was very impressed with him. And I remained a big fan of his till he tragically passed away. He said, "Why are you in the US? Why don't you come? We are opening up cellular." And I didn't know anything about cellular.
He was Minister of State for Home, right?
No, he became later. He was Minister of State for Communication.
Okay.
And he said, "Why don't you? We are opening up, and this is the great India, and why don't you try it?" And I was entitled to a sabbatical in Intel, so I said, "Okay, let me take a 2-year leave of absence, and I will try it out." And the actual epiphany for me was when I was in Guruvayur, Kerala. It was rainy season, and I had just got married. I had actually come to India to do that bride searching thing, which is what NRIs did those days, right?
Unbelievable.
Unbelievable, yeah. It is unbelievable. When I say that story to my children today, they think it's unbelievable, but I did it anyway. So, no regrets. I don't want my wife to think that I regret that.
Did she bring that tray of chai and play the tanpura?
Yeah. No, since we met in the US, it was, I think, a bottle of soda water. So anyway, but I remember the epiphany was when I was in Guruvayur in a rainy season, and those days you can only make long distance calls through trunk call.
Oh God.
And I had to set up an appointment for my green card in the US Embassy here in Delhi. And I called and they said trunk call will take 3 hours. And I said, okay, urgent call.
Lightning or standard?
So then I did lightning call. And I could barely hear the embassy in the lightning call. Then I realized that what Rajesh Pilot was talking about cellular was obviously something that this country required. And that is how I stayed back.
Okay.
Yeah, and I
no regrets?
No, of course not. No. I don't regret any of the twists and turns in my life.
Why politics? That's one question, because you had made such a success of your life in the private sector. You know, media baron and everything. I don't even want to go into the list. I'm sure our viewers, our listeners will Google you as soon as they're here. Why politics?
No, look, I do this. I think it's one of those genetic defects in me that when I see opportunities, I just jump at it and grab it. 2006 was an unusual situation in Karnataka where the government had been formed between BJP and Kumaraswamy, JDS, for the first time ever. And the fourth Rajya Sabha seat was a seat that could only be won if the BJP and JDS together put up a candidate. On a Sunday afternoon where I was sitting at home and I had just finished biryani and I had sold my company, BPL Mobile, and I was just spending some time trying to rediscover myself or whatever it was. And somebody came to my house, a friend of mine, and said, I am going to meet Deve Gowda, whom I had never met, by the way. Said, why don't you come along? And because the movie that I was watching, I used to watch Malayalam movies on Asianet on Sundays. Because that movie was not interesting, I said, okay, fine, let me come along.
Talk about...
Yeah, and true fate. Yeah. I went and met Deve Gowda. He was recuperating in a hospital in the Jindal clinic. And he looked at me. I met him for first time, and he said, "What do you do?" I said, "I do nothing." He said, "Have you ever?"
I
thought
do
of-"
nothing.
No, no. As in,
Right.
I had just got out of telecom, and
Okay.
so he said, "Why don't you join politics? Have you thought about politics?" So I said, "Look, I've thought of politics as in during Atalji's time, I had running battles with Pramod ji and Arun Shori. I was the cellular person, and I know politics. I've dealt with politics. I've never thought of a career in politics." He said, "No, there is this fourth seat, and if you are interested, you should talk to the BJP." So, and my very close friend and colleague was Anant Kumar ji, who from Karnataka.
Correct.
You know, he was
Yes.
a great brother and a great mentor, and we went back a long way. So I and a lark went to his house from there, and I said, "Anant Kumar ji, this idea has come. What do you think?" And he was, of course, a great well-wisher of mine. He said, "No, you should." And then I caught a flight the next day, came to Delhi and met Advani ji, and said, "Look, this idea has been put in my head. What do you think?" And I knew Advani ji from the Atalji's time, the government time. And they say, "So you should try it." And then it sort of became a reality, and I got in, and I thought it was going to be just one term. But then I immediately, very early on, then led the 2G scam revelation, and because I understood telecom, and I was the one who led that. And then the term got over, and then I was offered a second term, and then of course
Yeah, the
then I
third
decided that I want to do this full time, and
Yeah.
I got out of all of my businesses and exited all the this thing, and I've been on this full time for now, I think from 2000 almost 14.
Yeah, you are very vocal on national security matters and also on the welfare of veterans.
Yes.
You've talked a lot about that. Now, the recent electoral loss in Himachal. Firstly, congratulations on the victory in Gujarat. That has been fabulous for your party.
Yeah, absolutely.
Now, but of course, being a journalist, I'm going to talk about the losses
Yeah, of course.
first. So, the Himachal loss, many were saying that it's probably because people in Himachal Pradesh did not buy into the Agnipath scheme. That's where the problem occurred, because Himachal sends, I think, I don't have the exact figures, but there are like some 2 lakhs or something of people, 2.8 lakh people from Himachal Pradesh who are in the armed forces currently.
Sure.
So, they are not too happy with the Agnipath scheme, because they feel so many of them, even when you drive in Himachal Pradesh, you'll notice people exercising all over the
Running.
place.
Absolutely.
Wanting to get into the forge.
Sure.
And they feel ab ye 3 saal mein wapas aa jayenge. So there is still not that faith in the Agnipath scheme, and that anger translated into, negative voting.
No, so there are two separate questions you're
Yes.
asking. One is the cause of the defeat, and
Yes.
that is, of course, beyond my pay scale, and I really don't know. I haven't studied it. But it's too close a contest to basically say that there was any mandate against the BJP. Many things could go wrong. I have been involved in elections for several years and in several states, never in Himachal. So I think we will wait for the analysis before we come to a conclusion of
Okay.
what caused that defeat. Was it internally our weakness? Because anytime we lose to the Congress, or if we ever lose to the Congress, I feel that it is to do with us doing something wrong rather than anybody in his right mind wanting to vote.
Okay, there's a lot of analysis on that
Yeah,
also, that
so-
the BJP defeats the BJP.
Yeah, so anyway, so that's a separate
Sure.
podcast, and we'll discuss that separately.
Okay.
But on the issue of Agnipath, and I say this with seriousness, it is a very powerful and a very good thing for the future of our armed forces and the future of Indian youth. Unfortunately, as with the Farm Bill, we have allowed some of the fake narratives or the not so true narratives of this to get ahead of the actual narrative of Agnipath. What does Agnipath do? Agnipath basically says, for a lot of youngsters who want to pursue a full-time career in the armed forces, there is no change. But there are a lot of youngsters whom I have met also, by the way, who say, no, we want a short-term association with the armed forces, and then we want to come out and continue to do what we want to do, startups, agriculture, whatever. It creates an opportunity for them. It does not change in any way the number of people who go into the armed forces. It does not change in any way the size of the armed force. And therefore, the absorption of people into the permanent cadre of the armed forces is not going to reduce by any stretch of imagination. So,
You feel communication maybe
possible or
was inadequate?
But
Fake narrative.
fake
regarding
narrative has gotten ahead of the true narrative. Sometimes it is not unusual for us to believe that if you do good, that the goodness of it will create a momentum. But like I said to you, that there is enough evidence that a fake narrative has the ability to
gather steam of its own.
steam faster and reach a larger audience. By which time the true narrative it's an uphill task for them to dismantle that. So and I think Agnipath is 100% about that. It is a powerful, modern way for our armed forces to be modernized, made younger over the next 5 years, 10 years time. It does not change in any which way the composition or the abilities for people who want permanent careers in the armed forces, does not restrict that in any way. But it creates an additional element of short term. People who want to come in and then want to not do the armed forces for the rest of their life and want to do something else.
And it's also an extension of what you were talking about in skill development, because they are equipped now with new skills.
Absolutely.
Which they can use in the private sector.
But Smita, I have met youngsters, I have met so many students who say, we don't want to do this full time. We don't want to join the armed forces as a career. We want to serve our nation for 3 years, 5 years, and then we want to go and do our thing.
Right.
Because there are so many other opportunities.
For example, what could be some of the things that they could do after this?
I mean, you can come in, do a 3-year the old
Short
days
service
short
commission.
service commission. The same way, if you are a fighting soldier or an airman, you come and do a short term, get the skills, and go out there and either become an entrepreneur, become the
Drone pilot.
go do start a business, go got jobs, pursue higher education. My father came into the Air Force as an airman.
Okay.
And he worked his way up and became an officer, became a flyer, and it was a struggle.
Yeah.
This allows somebody to get skills and go out there, make some money in those 3 years, 4 years, go get free education, and absolutely qualitatively change his career trajectory instead of remaining an airman all his life or remaining a soldier all his life. So I think that narrative didn't go out there powerfully enough. Or if it did, it was in a sense preempted by the fake narrative कि आप लोगों को 3 साल के बाद निकाल देंगे, छुट्टी कर देंगे, which is not at all the idea of the Agnipath.
Yeah.
And by the way, all modern fighting combat forces, the US, every other force has adapted to this and used this as a way of creating a core army and having the volunteer force, the short-term force, come in and then pursue,
So
do the national
the
service.
fake narrative also was that you're creating one, a mercenary army, not totally committed, and two, an incompletely trained officer or an incomplete soldier. When you put him in, and cannon fodder. That was the third thing.
No, look, this is some of these retired, I know a few retired generals and the purists, the actual, hardcore, and they, I have great respect for them, but I think they fail to understand that you can be a committed soldier without having to be, for the rest of your life, a soldier.
Yeah, okay.
And I think that is the basic thing that they haven't picked up, or they don't want to pick up, or they don't want to acknowledge.
Okay.
The Indian youth is a patriotic young person, and given the tools, given the opportunity to serve the country, he wants to do it. She wants to do it, and we must create opportunities for them to do it. And by the way, the quality of our society, all of the other downstream impact of having people who have gone through service to the nation and then coming into the civilian life, there's tremendous other benefits to society at large. Imagine if you have more and more people in the police, more and more people in civil administration who come after having seen up close and center, experiencing what national service is about, and take those ethos and values into government in general, in bureaucracy, in administration.
Which you brought. I mean, before I wrap up, I'm going to ask you two questions. One is about your life also, because what you were talking about, you've also lived in cantonments. You bring about that in your commitment towards, your nationalism, or when you talk about veterans. I see that when you speak about it. Tell me a little bit about your life.
No, Smita, no, I don't want to make it sound like a fairy tale or any of that, but I have grown up around men and women, men in uniform and their families all my life. I mean, all my young life, youth life, part of the life that shapes your thinking. And I have seen them only interested in a sense, Mission India. They never talked about anything other than that. And I have played badminton as a youngster on a badminton court with a fighter pilot to find 2 days later that he died in a crash. So these are people, real people and real lives that I've experienced. And their entire common thread amongst all of them and their families was that they were there for a cause, and they were putting all this effort, putting their lives on the line because they believed in this cause, and that cause was Mother India, the country that they served. So that has, as much as you think that
it becomes intrinsic to you,
it becomes
right?
in your DNA. It becomes in your. People don't get it sometimes. People think that it is an act. People think it's you're putting on is ultra patriotism. All of that you say, but this is part of the DNA of most Fauji kids. Even today, my dad, at the age of 84, goes off to the National War Memorial. You have to hold him down, and he goes and sits. A high point in his year's calendar is when he goes off and snaps a salute at the memorial. So those things do leave an indelible sort of a mark in your, let's say, who you are.
Could that
And
be
I'm
the
glad that
reason?
it has. In my case, I'm very glad that it has.
Could that be a reason why you moved towards national service,
No,
towards public service?
and again, I have said this publicly. For me, the fact that I couldn't serve my nation in uniform, in a sense, I think I'm compensating by serving in public life now. And I seriously consider this as a mission to serve. I don't see this as, I don't see politics as power or influence and all of that. And that is why I really believe in the way Honorable Prime Minister talks about public life, about sevak, about this is public service, rather than I am the more powerful minister or you are the less powerful or all of that. So I think that comes from my own background of being around people who saw duty as a calling. And I think this is a calling for me.
I'm going to wrap up with Karnataka, my home state, and you're an MP from Karnataka. Tell me, where are we in politics in Karnataka? Because it seems that both the Congress and the BJP, both of them are on a weak wicket, and it serves either party's purpose.
No, I don't
that
think
it's so fragmented, the leadership.
Yeah, no, I think, look, there is, it's close to election time and there will be noise and chatter and all of that. That's par for the course. But under the CM, he's a new CM. He's in a sense been put into the deep end of the pool a year or so ago. We have established that administratively, from a point of view of governance, we are leaving a mark. We are following the Prime Minister's footstep, and the large-scale delivery of Government of India schemes without discrimination, without fear or favor across the landscape of citizens of Karnataka is really what we are going to go back to the people and seek another mandate with.
Which you did in Gujarat, you did in Uttar
Absolutely.
Pradesh, this whole Labharti voters,
Yeah.
those who have benefited from
The
government schemes.
beneficiaries of good governance, I call it that. Finally, the relationship between a citizen and a government is that of how I benefited from that
But in
government.
Karnataka, is it there? Because there's a lot that people say that the corruption is so phenomenal in Karnataka that it doesn't, the Labhartis aren't so many.
No, that's not correct at all. And I mean, in every scheme, whether it's PM Ayush, PM Awas, all of those schemes, Karnataka is way ahead in terms of getting those schemes delivered to the citizens. Look, this story of corruption is a legacy story in Karnataka because there are too many years and decades of politicians turn entrepreneurs, turn real estate that dot the landscape of Karnataka politics. But that is not something that was created in the last 4 years. That was created over several decades of a certain type of politics that was practiced by the Congress and their other acolytes. That has to change. That will change. It is changing. and under Prime Minister Narendra Modi ji's BJP, that will change. And we are in the process of changing. Nobody is claiming today that the Karnataka is totally cleaned of all these sins of KJ George and Siddaramaiah and DK Shivkumar. But we are making clearly an effort. People understand that change is underway, and that is the mandate that we are going to seek again from them for the next 5 years.
Right. Thank you so much. I think I've taken a lot of your time.
Thank you.
Most grateful that you could come
Thank you,
here
Smita.
and speak to us about a whole range of issues. So we hope to have you soon, as
Thank
soon
you.
as the Karnataka elections
Thank
are
you.
done and
Thank you.
dusted with.
Thank you, Smita. Thank you for having me.
Thanks. Thank you. Thank you for watching or listening in to this edition of ANI Podcast with Smita Prakash. Do like or subscribe on whichever channel you have seen this or heard this. Namaste. Jai Hind.